Hello, everyone. So happy you're here. My name is Merani. I'm a front-end designer at Sparkbox, originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico, currently based in Dayton, Ohio. So today, I'll be talking about auditing what issues you have or don't have, specifically thinking about what are 3 common legacy site issues and what are some ways or research methods in which we can address these. So let's get started. So kind of how this is going to be structured, I'll be referencing this legend of levels of effort, at least that's what I'm calling it, in which we can see the levels of effort you need to put into each research method in order to tackle your legacy site issue. Saying this, I believe anyone could do these research methods. It just depends on the time and level of effort you're willing to invest to learn how to do these. So just to go into detail on these, we can see here we have from low to high levels of effort. Starting with low, I would consider this as being someone who has the information accessible to them, and they're able to do this relatively quickly. For the medium effort, this could probably be someone who could do these research methods with some level of learning or research. And lastly, for our highest effort category, which could be someone who might need to do a lot of research and analysis on that specific research. So keeping that in mind, let's look at our first common legacy site issue. So, your navigation confuses users. This is a pretty common and big issue we see with these old legacy sites. Your navigation can really make or break the experience of your website. We need to make sure we're providing people a clear path on how to navigate our website, and we don't want any users to feel lost at any point. So let's take, for example, the navigation on this plants.gov legacy site. I'm not going to go into much detail about what things are wrong here, but let's pretend that this is the navigation we're looking at. Let's think about what are some research methods we could use to pinpoint or figure out what is the problem happening here. So again, taking into consideration our levels of effort legend, let's start exploring what research methods we can use to evaluate our navigation. Starting with our low effort, you could look at your site's analytics. Your site's analytics will give you great insight on issues you might be having in your navigation by looking at things like time on page, pages per session, goal completion rates, or page popularity. Another thing you could do that is relatively of low effort is to look at some published research. This is a great way to see what are some best practices when it comes to a site navigation, and you can adapt your site to have a navigation that is supported by that research. And lastly, for our lowest effort, we could look at heat maps using tools like Hotjar, or I know there's others out there, but this allows you to see what users are clicking on in your site. For a medium effort, you could do some competitive analysis, both with direct or indirect competitors. This is a great way to see what others are doing with their navigations. You could take this valuable information and come up with a solution that is a mix of your findings, but it's even better because you learn about what others are doing. Another method that is relatively of medium effort, if you have this set up, is to look at your site's screen recordings. This is a great way to see firsthand how users are navigating through your site on a daily basis. And lastly, for our high level of effort, I have 3 UX research methods. If you're brand new to UX, these are probably going to take you some time to learn and master, which is why I have them in this column. So, first up, we have usability testing, which is the process of gathering users and giving them a set of tasks to test out your product or experience. This is a great way to see how users are going through your site in real time and it allows you to receive feedback from your users. So here is an example of a user looking for the latest dev-related blog post on our Sparkbox site.
Okay. So if I'm looking through here, the first thing I see is read the article. So I can go to that. And creating an effective virtual onboarding process. Okay, so this is not looking at a development thing. I don't see a way to get on back. I can go back to the Sparkbox. There's this boundary that is highlighted, so you can see what that is. Okay. There's development. Okay. So that seems like how I would get there. That's not a quick thing to get to. I don't know if I would have known how exactly to get there directly. Coming at this with fresh eyes. So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great. And then for our second UX research method, I have tree testing. Tree testing is when you test your navigation by giving users a task. For example, giving them a piece of content, and they have to go find that within your site, just looking at your navigation. Users then have to point out where they would expect to find this information, only use your navigation, like I said. Here's an example of what that would look like.
Want to move house and want to transfer your phone and internet to the new address. How would you do that? So we need to find within this navigation where I would think I could find that information. And I'm gonna click my account. Probably not here. Let's check help support. Moving house. So I think that's where I would find this information. Done.
And then for our last research method, we have card sorting. So card sorting is exactly what it sounds like. You give users a set of cards, and they need to figure out where these cards belong in relation to one another. They could group cards within categories, or they might be the ones making those categories. It depends on what you want to gain from conducting this exercise. Card sorting overall is a great way to understand people's mental models and how they go about organizing or grouping things together. Here I have 3 images that best show or describe what card sorting looks like. The first image on the top left shows the process of grouping cards and creating categories for these groups. This would be called an open card sort. The second image on the left shows the same process, but people have to group the cards under predetermined categories. This is called a closed card sort. And then the last image is just people doing a card sorting exercise in person. You could also conduct this method online if you need to, more working at home and things. There are great tools to do that. And then lastly, I've decided to include what a heat map looks like, since I don't think people might not know what this is. Here we can see it's showing with the use of a heat map what users are clicking on our site. It's a great way to visualize what users are clicking the most and the least by temperature color indicators. So with that, to wrap up our first issue, this is something to keep in mind. Your site navigation should always be accessible and have a consistent path for the user to get back to the information they need. And next up, let's look at our second issue here. So your forms and flows confuse users. I think having good forms and flows is essential for a good user experience. People need to easily be able to input the information they need And we need to make sure they feel confident and not lost when they're providing that information. So here we have an example of a pretty lengthy residential parking permit form. Again, I'm not going to go into much detail on this, but let's pretend that this is the form and flow we're working with. What might be some research methods we could use to investigate what things we can improve within this form? Again, looking at our legend, for our lowest effort, I have 3 research methods that we could use. First would be, again, to look at some published research. There are tons of publications out there that talk about what are some best practices when it comes to forms and flows. Read it through and learn how you could possibly improve your forms. I would also read some publications on what are some possible accessibility wins. For our second lowest effort method, you could look at your site's form submissions. This is a great way to see if there's any discrepancies in the information being submitted. You could ask yourself questions like, are people inputting the right information according to each field? Is some information you need for your site not being shared? And for our last lowest effort research method, I have again looking at your site's analytics. In this case, I would strongly recommend looking at where drop-offs in a form or a conversion funnel happen. A good example of this would be a shopping cart checkout flow. For our medium effort, first we can do a competitive analysis, like we did with our navigation. Look at what others are doing. Is there anything that stands out from your research? Are there things that seem to be essential for all forms and flows? Who's doing it best? Who's doing it the worst? This is all good information when it comes to updating your site's forms and flows to have a good experience for your users. Another thing that we could do that is relatively of medium effort is to do a heuristic evaluation. And think about this as being a set of rules of thumbs that you should follow in order for your forms and flows to be usable. Some of these rules include things like visibility of system status, having consistency in standards, or keeping your design choices to a more minimal approach when it comes to these forms. And lastly, for our highest effort, I have again usability testing, which we already saw in action how that works. But in this case, you might want to do a test specifically for your forms and flows. And here we can see an example of a site's analytics. We can see that there was a huge point of drop-offs in this checkout flow, if you see that to the bottom left. This is really good information to have because it shows you that there is something clearly going on within this checkout flow. And with that, to wrap up our second issue, keep in mind, forms and flows should be simple and easy to use. They should give enough information to easily guide the user through the steps, and I would recommend thinking about mobile users as well. For our last issue we have, your general site content confuses users. Content is pretty important when it comes to sharing valuable information to your users. Is your content helping or confusing your users more? Let's see some ways in which we can research our site's content. So for this issue, I'm actually using our sparkbox.com team page as an example, because it recently underwent a major redesign and modifying the content was a big part of that shift. I can talk more in detail about this one because we actually did do the research on it. And we found out that our site's content, specifically on this page, was confusing users more than helping them understand how our team was structured. So, what are some research methods we could have used for this issue? Looking at our legend, for our lowest effort, we could have done a site audit. This helps us see all the content that is currently on our site, and it helps us identify if there's any content that is outdated, duplicated, or needs to be removed. we could have looked at our customer service chat logs or website inquiries. This could have helped us see if users have any questions for things that are already within our site's content, or maybe things that might not be there. This is a great way to get valuable information about what is working and not working within your site's content. And next up, for a medium effort, we could have done some user interviews. User interviews are the process of interviewing users within your audience by asking them a set of questions related to the issue you are trying to research. In this case, it could have been for general site content. Another thing that we could have done that is relatively of medium effort is coming up with a survey and sending this to users within our audience. And lastly, for our highest effort, I have 3 UX research methods, starting with, again, doing a round of usability testing. For this method, you could strategically test the existing content on your site and see what issues exist there. You could also create a user persona. This would benefit you when it comes to checking the content on your site and making sure it aligns with your established audience. And lastly, we could have done a user journey mapping. This would have allowed us to understand our customers' needs and goals. So here's what a user persona looks like. Based on research, we're able to define who our audience is and create a persona that embodies that. We include in this persona things like position, age, experience, behaviors, and what are some of their goals and needs. And here's an example of a user journey map. It outlines the user's journey through a site or product, starting with where they come from and ending with what happens after they complete the experience. This is a great way to understand what our users' needs are and what we need to do in order for them to easily achieve their goals within the experience. And with that, to wrap up our third and last issue, keep in mind, share important content and remove what is not necessary. Concise content plus clear design equals great UX. And then since these slides are going to be shared, I've attached a pretty lengthy list of tools and resources for you to get started on tackling these common issues. I have links for each of these resources, and they're also organized by all the research methods we've discussed today. I've also included this. You will all probably get this after the conference, but this is a great resource our Sparkbox team put together for user interviews, specifically when looking for users to interview. It is pretty well designed, and I just thought I'd share it with you guys. I've also included a link to this research study the Sparkbox team worked on. I think Julie touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the conference. But in this study, we researched multiple higher ed navigations and shared really good insights and recommendations based on what we found. And to wrap everything up, I just want to say, you got this. If you do have a legacy site, I really hope my talk serves you as a guide to get started and feel more confident about tackling these big common UX issues. Just as a quick reminder, these slides are going to be available to you to use. Just remember to download them from the event page. And I think that's it. So thank you so much.
Hey, thanks again for checking out this video. If you want to learn more about how we're building a better web, visit us at sparkbox.com.